Head all full of stuffin'. Story of Scrow. In Westfall's southern foothills, a goblin engineer was hard at work establishing his base of operations. In preparation for his mission, he'd painted up several artificial trees. He was confident they would conceal his operations, and perhaps a bit too confident that they themselves would not be noticed by the nearby humans. After testing their stability, he gave a satisfied nod and turned around to deal with the rest of his camp.
Well, hi there.
The goblin jumped back and nearly stumbled right down the foothills, his nearly fresh cigar flying out from his mouth. Staring directly at him with a toothy grin was a lanky Forsaken.
Ay-ya-ya, he shouted. Don't startle me like that. What if somebody heard me?
My bad.
The undead arrival shrugged.
I take it you're the rogue they assigned to help me on this mission, yeah? Well, the name's Recco Greasescuzzle, of Greasescuzzle Enterprises. And you would be?
Scrow.
A long moment passed, during which Recco lit up another cigar, but she did not elaborate further.
Right. Nice to meet you then, Scrow. Have you been fully apprised of the mission?
He queried.
Why don't you run it by me anyway, just to be safe?
She suggested, crossing her legs and taking a seat.
Sure, why not? Basically, we want to recreate the Alliance's Harvest Golem technology for the Horde. Would save a lot of hassle if we can do that. They do things a bit more delicately than our shredders. To do that, we need you to get down to those farms and bring back any golem parts that you're able to. Then, it's my job to do the mechanical investigating. Learn what makes them tick, you know? Anyway, they told me you're a top-notch rogue, one of the Horde's best that are currently operating in the region.
Scrow scrunched her eyes closed, grinned again, and scratched the back of her head.
They said that about little old me? Well, they're not wrong, but golly gee, they sure know how to make a girl blush.
Given the lack of blood flowing to her cheeks, Scrow was not, in fact, blushing.
Well, you managed to give me a good scare, so I'm willing to believe it,
Recco told her.
And it looks like you've already made some preparations yourself.
Why do you say that?
Your outfit,
Recco sputtered. Indeed, his new companion's trappings were all too fitting for the job at hand. She had clothed herself in ragged leathers, with her pants and shirt being of light brown hues. Her gloves and boots were of a dark brown, thick, folded, and seemingly stuffed with straw. Upon her shoulders rested what appeared to be entire heaps of the stuff. In lieu of a proper belt, she wore an intricately tied rope. Likewise, another loop was tied underneath her brown, flared collar. Atop her head rested a rather large hat, its dilapidated and stitched together brim reaching far enough to obscure her face at certain angles, and its tip trailing off into a jagged tail of sorts. This too featured a small rope, with straw bursting out at certain points. Lastly, a lengthy, slender cloak with earthy tones hung from her back. Altogether, she seemed to very closely resemble the very harvest golems they aimed to investigate.
You like it?
Scrow beamed, supposing he had been complimenting her taste and fashion.
I mean, it's gotta be helpful for infiltrating the farms, no?
Oh,
She gasped.
yeah, I think you're right. I just like how it looks on me. I'm a big fan of harvest golems. I'm a real farm girl at heart.
No kidding. I suppose that explains why he took an assignment sending you this near to Stormwind.
Recco peeked his head beyond his foliage to ensure they hadn't caught any unwanted attention.
Listen, you're the sneaky one here, so I'm gonna let you do your thing. But by my estimate, we've got about 4 hours until sunset.
I'd better get to work then.
She declared whilst rising to her feet.
Whoa, I meant you might as well take it easy until then. Why are you going now?
Later it'll be too quiet. People might be sleeping, but any little bump in the night puts them on high alert. They expect noise during the day, and pay less attention to it.
Recco scratched at his chin, contemplating.
Yeah, that does make sense.
He nodded.
Well then, have at it.
Wish me luck.
Scrow laughed before doing a twirl and diving down the hillside. As she did so, shadowy magic enveloped her, and she all but disappeared from sight. The goblin could vaguely make out the distortion of her silhouette, but really only because he'd just seen her. A random passerby was significantly less likely to. With any luck, her mission would go smoothly enough that her unintentional disguise wouldn't even factor into their success. Ever the worrywart, he extracted a spyglass from his knapsack and tried his best to follow her course. All the while, he compulsively puffed away. Smoking his cigars had developed into a regular outlet for his anxieties. He of course lost track of Scrow almost immediately, but he continued his vigil nonetheless. It wasn't as though there was much he could do until she returned anyway. Scrow made it to the base of the foothills swiftly enough. As the breadbasket for much of the Alliance's population south of Cosmodon, Westfall had no shortage of grain fields of various types. It was the harvest season, so most were currently populated by farmhands, and about half had one or more golems facilitating the process. Efficient as they could be, their use was far from ubiquitous even now. She reckoned that setting her sights on any of those currently in operation would be foolhardy. Instead, she made for the barns and sheds that were far less likely to be currently attended. It didn't take long at all to pick out one whose entrance was obscured from all relevant angles. A simple padlock barred her path, but picking it was utter child's play. Once inside, she hastily surveyed the contents of the shed. Another fortunate benefit of skulking about in the daylight was that she could actually investigate the place without requiring a light source that would signal her presence. This particular shed contained nothing related to the harvest golems, so she took her leave and secured the lock exactly as she had found it before determining her next target. She repeated this general process 3 additional times before finding what she was looking for. Resting beneath a burlap tarp was a seemingly inert golem. Almost compulsively, she began wriggling her body about in a burst of joyous energy. The perfect find. Stuffed away here and out of mind, its absence would be unlikely to be discovered for some time, even if she absconded with the entire automaton. Unfortunately, she found herself a bit paralyzed in her current situation. Though it was easy enough to slide herself into these barns, extracting an entire harvest golem was always going to be somewhat of a challenge. She couldn't extend her shrouding abilities around the entire construct. Perhaps it would be necessary to make the return trip beneath the cover of night. Behind her, a small hole in the barn's wooden walls left her with a clear view of a certain household. Nearly instinctually, she found her hands clutching at the opposite sides of her torso, and her back hunching tighter. Though it had ceased beating years ago, she felt as though her heart were starting to race. Before her state could worsen, she made an effort to push such thoughts out of her mind. Instead, she focused on the golem before her. Slowly, yet surely, she was able to calm herself down.
Well, handsome, looks like we're waiting this one out a bit.
She spoke at last, resting her sinewy arm upon his broad shoulders. After adjusting her position so there was no chance of being discovered by accident, she settled in and waited for the farmers of Westfall to retire for the evening.
There you are.
Rekko exclaimed once Scrow made her triumphant return to the camp several hours later. Realizing just how loud he'd been, he turned back and scanned the lands below them for any sign of activity. No, they appeared to remain unnoticed. For now.
I was beginning to think you'd been caught. What took you so long?
Lots of waiting,
she succinctly summarized.
but I managed to get our friend out of there.
Though hardly necessary, she gestured to the large harvest golem she'd hauled up with her.
No kidding. That's what I'm talking about.
Rekko quietly cheered as he rummaged about for a flashlight he had misplaced.
Say, not to get too far ahead of myself, but we should probably square away the finances of this operation. I was thinking 50-50. I get 50% of the profits, and you get 50% of what's left. Fair is fair, right?
Scrow appeared to be attempting some form of mathematics with her fingers when Rekko at last located the flashlight. Deeming it best to move on before she could object to the proposition, he began his inspection. It would have to be a rudimentary one for now. There were limits to how freely he could shine around his light.
Now let's have a looky-loo at the innards. I've always heard these things have a tendency to go haywire, but I figure that's because of hay getting caught up in the wires. I'll make sure to seal the joints more thoroughly to mitigate that.
Yeah, sometimes they go on a murderous rampage, but they're easy enough to pacify.
Scrow confirmed.
That's odd,
The goblin muttered.
What is?
Instead of answering, Rekko kept wading through the interior of the golem, becoming more aggressive and reckless as he proceeded.
This has to be some kind of sick joke.
I don't get it.
Scrow complained.
You sure don't.
Rekko practically shouted.
This conflabbit heap of metal and straw barely has any of its interior parts left.
Where did they go?
They probably harvested all of its still functional components to repair other golems. Damn it all.
Huh. Well, that explained why it wasn't actually that heavy. I thought my muscles were just growing.
The Forsaken mused.
How would...
Rekko started to protest before changing course.
I can scarcely learn a thing from this heap of junk. How did you not realize it was hollow, you bag of bones?
You're getting pretty worked up about this, huh?
Scrow noted.
Of course I'm worked up. I've got everything riding on this operation. I need the money that we're gonna make off of it, and I need it yesterday.
Scrow was starting to grow bored of their conversation, but deemed it best not to voice that thought, instead allowing Rekko to prattle on about his concerns.
Look, I'm gonna tell you the truth that not a lot of people know about me. Grease Scuzzle Enterprises is only afloat because I took out some questionable loans from the venture company. Well, those loans are due, and their debt collectors are enthusiastic about their jobs.
Well, it's important to enjoy your work.
The rogue interjected.
Yeah, I'm real happy for them,
Rekko spat.
Anyway, the long and short of it is, we need to succeed here, and do it soon, or my goose is cooked. So pardon me if I get a bit temperamental about any completely unnecessary setbacks.
I can tell that you're stressed.
Scrow acknowledged.
How about I whip up some tea to help calm your nerves?
The goblin's left eye started to twitch uncontrollably.
I've heard that a lot of Forsaken got partially lobotomized just before their first deaths, and just have to deal with that now that they're raised. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Did you want chamomile or lavender?
Rekko took his faltering cigar and bluntly smushed it into the soil.
Neither. I'm going to bed.
The following morning, Rekko found himself taking another look at the specimen Scrow had procured him. There were even fewer internal components remaining than he'd surmised the previous night, but any knowledge he could gain about their structure could prove valuable. Despite this, he found himself far too irritable to learn much at all. At his back, Scrow had been making preparations for her second foray into the farmlands. Her blades were sharpened and her poisons were stocked. Rekko glanced over to gauge her progress, to discover she was now staring into a small mirror.
What are you doing?
Just making sure my face is presentable.
But why? Isn't the whole idea to not let them see your face?
The goblin posited.
It's not for them, silly. Self-care is very important for a healthy life,
she explained. He simply shrugged and resumed his half-hearted analysis. Scrow possessed hauntingly white skin, which had faced relatively little decay. Her shoulder-length light pink hair coalesced into a bit of a natural mound off the back of her head, and her eyes were of a similar hue, though unsettling and vibrant. All of this she promptly hid behind the glorified satchel that served as her mask. Matching the rest of her outfit, its brown coloration was only broken up by the orange distorted eyes and mouth cut into it.
I'm off then.
Great. This time come back with something more useful,
Rekko grumbled, though she didn't seem to have heard him. This time around, she had resolved to take a more direct approach, despite the increased risk. Even if she were lucky enough to find another golem in storage, they could be suffering from similar deficiencies. By nabbing one straight from the fields, she could guarantee its functionality. Upon reaching them, she slipped between the rows of crops and eyed several potential targets. Her intent was to whisk away one that was already nearby, and to do so early while there were fewer humans about. Once she had identified an ideal specimen, she equipped one of her weapons, a gauntlet of sorts fashioned out of wooden chunks, with 4 metal blades protruding from it. It and its matching companion were heavily inspired by the harvesting blades of the golems. In one sweeping motion, she felled several large tufts of wheat. She then hastily wrapped them up into several bundles and tied those same bundles to her arms, legs, and across her chest. Satisfied with her work, she approached her quarry and exposed herself to it. The golem momentarily halted to analyze her, then seemed to notice the large volumes of wheat attached to her. It likely helped matters that she also had straw protruding from her clothing, which the golem was likely programmed to harvest. Sure enough, it abandoned its previous course and began traipsing after Scrow, arms aloft. She hastily strode backwards, being mindful not to lose her footing. Every few seconds, the construct would pause and whirl its entire upper body around in an attempt to reap her. Avoiding that was of even greater importance. Step by step, the two of them waltzed closer to the foothills. It very much seemed like this operation was about to wrap up. Almost before she realized it, a muscular hound was bearing down upon her, with another hot on its heels. The first sunk its teeth into her leg, and would have continued to do so were it not called off by its master. A moment later, it became evident to her why he had done so, as the golem's arms came within inches of decapitating her. Instinctually, she threw a small explosive to the ground and disappeared in a momentary cloud of smoke. Her golem quickly lost interest and returned to its proper field. Instead, she was now contending with a human hunter and his 2 mutts. I don't know what you want with our golems, you thieving corpse, but I know it can't be good. Your first mistake was failing to notice me on guard duty. Your second mistake was believing you could hide your stench of undeath from my hounds. Scrow anxiously pranced about as his 2 dogs started straight for her. Though she'd used her shadow magic to hide herself, it indeed did little to counteract their powerful noses. And the more she had to move around, the less she was able to focus on maintaining the illusion. Before long, she had to abandon it altogether. She could tell that while his pets were keeping her busy, the hunter was taking aim at her himself. The more time she gave him, the worse her odds. Once more she vanished from their sight, startling both hounds for but a second or two. This brief lapse was all she needed to smack one across the back of the head and incapacitate it. She then threw dirt into the eyes of the other, blinding it for a time. With the 2 of them under control, she set her sights on the human. At that moment, something collided with her arm and exploded into 1,000 smaller pieces. As an entire murder of crows descended upon her, she realized that he'd struck her with a projectile of birdseed. To the hunter's delight, his strategy had completely disabled the undead. As the birds screeched and pecked at her, she could scarcely manage to even hold her arms up to shield her head. Rather than fighting back, she was trembling. Inside of her mind, Scrow could scarcely hear anything other than the cawing of her assailants and 2 angry voices shouting. Steeling herself at last, she spun around and sliced up nearly all of them with her 8 metallic claws, the few survivors scattering away. The human had used her moment of vulnerability to prepare a much deadlier shot, which he now let loose. Before it could find its target, however, Scrow stepped through the shadows and appeared behind the hunter. She delivered a fierce blow to his kidney, this time leaving him doubled over and unable to act. Unable to regain his composure in time, he could do little to stop Scrow from completely eviscerating him. Geysers of blood erupted from his wounds and showered her a great deal. She whined as he continued bleeding to death.
You ruined my favorite outfit. It's gonna take forever to get this out.
As the hounds slowly regained their composure, they seemed to have lost interest in her and instead poked their snouts concernedly at their master's body. Despite the hectic encounter, Scrow hastily returned to her scheme of luring the harvest golem away. It was a task made somewhat more difficult by all of the red stains obfuscating her wheat disguise. Still, time was of the essence. Even if she herself went unnoticed, it was inevitable that her adversary's absence would be discovered. Once she and the golem had nearly made their way up to Rekko, she cast one final, wistful glance back, down at the golden plains before her, and then promptly turned away once more.
Ugh, that was a tricky getaway, but we pulled it off.
Rekko cheered from the safety of the Gromgal base camp in northern Stranglethorn.
They're gonna be on high alert for weeks after what you did to that guy. And how fortunate for us that my patented suspension rockets were able to keep our newfound friend aloft for us.
That did look really fun,
Scrow had to admit.
Do you think I can try them out?
Well, I'm all out of fuel, but if we ever cross paths again, sure, why not?
The goblin grinned.
Provided you sign the appropriate waivers, of course. Now then, I've been itching to get a proper look inside this thing.
Once he had deactivated the golem, and only once he was absolutely sure he had done so, Rekko peeled open its chest compartment.
Wowza, is that a reverberating flux expansion condenser? Were goblins involved in the prototyping of these things? But why did they connect it directly to the undulation facilitating tubing? This is some real interesting stuff.
Like a mole burrowing into its den, Rekko dove deeper and deeper into the golem with fascination. He didn't even notice the smoke that had started to billow out of the golem until the flames causing them were licking at his feet.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Somebody help a goblin out! We've got a fire over here!
An orc grunt managed to disappear and return with a bucket full of seawater in short order. It was fortunately enough to extinguish the small blaze, though a fair amount of damage had already been done and the water was damaging in its own way.
Thanks,
Rekko sighed. Despondently, he plucked the now dampened cigar from his mouth, realizing what had caused the fire in the first place.
My wife is always saying these things will be the death of me. Turns out she may be right.
Next to him, Scrow had descended to her knees and had her hands pressed together in a solemn prayer.
Noble guardian of the fields, I observe the sacrifice you have made and honor the life you lived until this day.
Were her tear ducts not all dried up, Rekko suspected she'd have been crying as well.
How can you be so deranged? Actually, you've been way too lackadaisical for this whole operation, and it's driving me a little bit crazy.
Recco snapped.
Maybe your neck's not on the line, but mine sure as heck is, and I'd appreciate it if you took this all a little seriously.
He was met only with silence.
What am I even talking about? You're probably just soft in the head and don't even understand the gravity of the situation. Well, I didn't have an easy upbringing like you probably did. I had to kick and claw my way to get where I am today, and I'm not expecting to have a second go of it like you're getting to enjoy. Ugh, I'm getting a migraine now.
I wasn't lobotomized, if that's still what you're thinking.
Scrow chimed in at last.
When I was growing up, my mother and father would fight. Almost every day. She was very strict. He was very scatterbrained. It was the best I could do not to get caught in the crossfire. That's how I got so good at sneaking around unnoticed. It was the best way for me to survive, and eventually it became second nature to me. And I always had to be on my toes. Always planning my next step. Always thinking. I didn't really enjoy my life at all.
She could hear Recco swallow the catch in his throat. He hadn't expected anything but the shallowest of responses from her.
When my second life began, I decided that I was tired of thinking. So from then on, I've done as little of that as possible, whatever the consequences might be. And you know what I learned? I prefer it this way. Letting go of all that weight. I'm actually the happiest I've ever been.
Before, she'd simply been staring forward, but now she peered straight into the goblin's eyes.
I kind of like you, Recco, but you're way too high-strung. The only advice I can give is to try not thinking so hard.
I can't do that. I'm an engineer. My job is literally to think hard, he pointed out.
Oh,
Scrow almost gasped.
well, I don't know then. Good luck. I've got some clothes to scrub clean.
Already, she was stripping off the bloodied segments of her armor.
Seems more like you've scrubbed your brain clean,
Recco muttered to himself. Next to him, the left arm of the harvest golem came detached and clanged against the soil. A young Seychelles Crowler sat at her family's kitchen table, huddled against the surface and attempting to appear as small as possible, as if her parents' bickering would fly right over her head. Her mama was hard at work massaging her own forehead. Honestly, how could you be so absent-minded? Am I to work all day only to come home and prepare dinner while you lounge about playing games with our daughter? Her papa nervously scratched at his failing hairline and attempted to defuse the situation. It's easily ameliorated, dear, he assured her. Shan't take me more than 2 hours. In 2 hours, it'll be Seychelles' bedtime. You think it's a good idea to let her go hungry that long? We do have snacks to tide her over until then. She merely sighed. And spoil her appetite? No need to sour the mood, he blurted. So now it's my fault, she snapped. That's not what I was saying, but I think you are perhaps overreacting just a bit. Seychelles doesn't need you to just be her friend. She needs you to be a responsible parent. I need you to be one. I hardly think you need to belittle me over it. I already admitted fault. That's all you ever do. How about actually mending your ways? She suggested, the volume of her voice shooting up. Why must everything always be such a big deal to you? He grumbled. You think I always want to be the strict one? You force me to because you never are. You only know how to have fun. Over and over, their voices shot back at one another, gradually growing louder and louder. Having already escaped to her room, Seychelles was now curled up underneath a blanket. The fabric was enough to muffle the details of what was said, but not to disguise the argument entirely. She began to rock forward and backward.
Please stop.
Caw! Not now. Seychelles peered out at the nearby farm to see a crow circling above the nearby rye field. Soon enough, another arrived, then another, and another, a whole cacophony of them plaguing the westfall sky. Caw! 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 They were so loud. They were always so loud and screechy.
Stop it.
She sobbed. Caw! Caw! Please. Caw! Whir! Whir! Seychelles wiped the tears away to investigate the bizarre sound. The crows had ceased their pillaging and were now mostly scattering from the field. Those that didn't soon met a grisly demise at the new arrival. What exactly was that thing anyway? Rotund, made with old knapsacks and overstuffed with straw, and metal claws on either hand. It was moving too, plopping about the field toward any of the invaders it could find, occasionally stopping to whirl around. It looked so goofy. For the first time in days, she let out a gentle laugh, not even able to hear the shouts from the other room anymore. What was this cute contraption wandering about with its silly movements? Her mother had grumbled about something earlier, seemingly describing what she now saw. Why hadn't Mama liked it? It was protecting the grains. It was keeping the awful crows away. It was wonderful. Seychelle kept watching the harvest golem until her parents called her for dinner. She knew the neighbor whom that field belonged to. Tomorrow, she'd ask him all about it. Okay, that is short story number 2, done and dusted. I kind of set a rule for myself that at maximum I would go 50 vendor trash episodes before doing another. Though I won't be able to wait that long between every character because I do not have like 600 video topics in mind. Anyway, I guess I'll just ramble off about my character a little bit. I think Rogue is like the 11th class that I rolled, because I remember making it during Miss of Pandaria, and at that point in time, Rogue was by far the least fun class for me. Though a not insignificant element of that was the fact that combo points were still tied to your target instead of your own character. And while I don't think Rogue will ever be one of my favorite classes, it's definitely climbed the ranks. It's probably like middle of the pack right now. I'm pretty sure this character started out as a male goblin, just going with the whole short and sneaky fantasy, but I was never super attached to that, and I always thought undead rogue was a little bit cliche. What really sold me on the whole concept was actually one of those Sour Fang CGI cinematics we got during BFA, the one where he goes to find Thrall in Nagrand and is attacked by 2 undead rogues. I know that absolutely wasn't the point of the cinematic, but I saw it and was like, dang, those guys look really cool. And one of them just had like dummy thick gat going on. Did I say that right? And historically, I haven't been super attached to any of the specs, though in recent years I have gravitated more and more towards the fantasy of subtlety rogues. So I guess canonically, Scrow is a subtlety rogue. I actually grabbed the name Scrow from Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, where the term Scarecrow was often abbreviated to that due to a character limit. So a spell like Scarecrow Funk just read as Scrow Funk. And Super Mario RPG is one of my favorite games of all time. I've probably played it like 3 or 4 times now. As for Hermog, at one point in time I was trying to work with the Harlequin set from the Trading Post, and just going for a whole Harley Quinn sexy clown vibe. But eventually I landed on the Harvest Golem Mog, but I think it still kind of works. And hey, Scarecrow, so we get to sort of combine 2 Batman villains here. Oh, and as the final part of the story revealed, Scrow is just an alias she has adopted, her pre-undeath name being Seychelle Crowler, mostly because that can be shortened to Scrow, obviously. Seychelle I got from Seychelle Gabriel, the actress who played Yue in the M. Night Shyamalan Avatar movie, and who would go on to voice Asami Sato in Legend of Korra. And I just really like the name Seychelle, it sounds pretty. Also, apparently the Seychelles are a country in East Africa comprising of like 115 islands. They also look very pretty. What else to say? I actually really like how the drawing turned out. Drawing all of that wheat was incredibly annoying, but I think it wound up alright. I opted to draw her without the mask just because I generally like seeing my characters' faces. Though I guess not always as evidenced by Zookaloo. I hope the story was okay. I didn't like it quite as much as Zookaloo's, and it took me like 4 iterations just to get to this. But I think I've rambled on about miscellaneous stuff way too long already, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for 100 episodes of Vendor Trash, and you know I will catch you next week.
Bye bye.